So almost as an application of the minhag sugya, we're going to take up a minhag that I have yet to be able to defend, which is as follows. All right, if you ask the average Jew, all right, on Shabbos when they have their lecha mishnah, let's get out of the habit of calling lecha of what you have on Shabbos challah. I may be the only person alive who's irritated by that, but it's not challah. Challah is what you're mafresh. It's lecha mishnah. All right, just talk like a lamdan. Lecha mishnah. So what does everybody, when you have lecha mishnah at the table?
The opposite of challah. Why do they call it that?
I don't know. It's a funny thing. So what do most people, if you go to someone's house, right, after they make hamotzi, what do they do with the challah? The lecha mishnah. What do they do with it? They put salt on it, right? Now some people,
After they eat.
before they eat it. Okay, so some people, right on top, right?
On the side.
Side dab, but there's always, and we know that that's certainly the normative practice on Shabbos because there's a minhag from Rosh Hashanah, right, from Al Tishrei, use honey instead. Okay. The problem though, the intrinsic problem is very simple. There is no idea whatsoever of having salt with your lecha mishnah. None.
Well,
Zero. There's an idea of having salt with every time you have bread. Okay? Nothing to do with Shabbos.
Yeah, it's because...
So it's a very strange thing that today, if you ask the average person, do you eat, Chabad does, by the way, or what? Chabad is very machmir about, I did my research, Chabad is very machmir about having bread with salt every time they have bread, and they'll dip their bread in salt 3 times. So
If it's just eating like regular bread with a side dish,
right?
That'll add salt. But if it's a sandwich,
But you don't need to if you have a side dish. All right. Well, let's get to that. Okay. So the question is I'm not interested in taking up the issue. We'll get at the end. We'll take up why people do it on Shabbos. We'll try to defend it, but not during the week. But the question is why is there any idea whatsoever of having salt with bread? Okay. So first we have to do that little sugya of Tul Baruch, which isn't directly related to it, and then the second Gemara is directly related to it, but the first mention of it comes in this Gemara. So the Gemara is in Brachos Memar Alf, right? Amar Rav, go.
Tul Baruch, in Yisrael Baruch.
Stop. What does that mean? Rashi.
Tul Baruch, Habotzei Kodem Shatam.
Habotzeya.
Habotzei Kodem Shatam Min Haputza.
Batza Mimena. So what's that? So the guy who's making hamotzi, the breaking of the bread, right? So he takes from it and gives it to the guy next to him. Miprusas bracha.
Take my piece of bracha.
Right, now here's the key words in Rashi. Right? Shesach beintayim. Whatever, same thing as hesach. But anyway, afapi shesach beintayim, which means what?
The interruption.
So even though there's an interruption. Okay, so that's Rashi's code word of saying.
Doesn't have shame hefsek.
That's Rashi's code word of having havamina. You would have thought that it's an interruption between the bracha and the actual performance of the maisa, right? Kamash malan, that is not. So there's your havamina maskana right there, right? You would have thought it is, but it turns out it's not. Why isn't it? Now, Rashi adds in one more point. Okay, the afagav, sicha. Conversation, hafsaka, 1 second. So even though we know that talking after you make a bracha is always considered a hefsek, kinamrina and Alright, so Rashi's almost laying out like the initial approach. So even though talking per se, it would be considered an interruption, right? But if the talking is tzarach bracha, it's not considered a hefsek. So that's the answer, right? The havmina is, I talked between making my bracha and the performance, but Rashi's telling you that as long as it's for tzarach bracha, that's not considered the case. On top of that, there's another point that Rashi's bringing out, more subtle but important to know, is that don't think this is a din in Birchas Nenen. That's why Rashi brings in the case of tefillin. Because what would you think? You would think it's just simply, maybe it's a din in food brachas, but by that you could have an interruption. But maybe you'd argue by a brichas mitzvah, such a thing wouldn't work. Kamash Landa, no, it's a din in bracha per se. Okay? All right. So the first question is, what's the havamina maskana? Right? Why would you think it is And what's the answer to say it's not? And then on top of that, finish the Gemara. The Gemara says, Have Melach.
Bring salt, bring seasoning. Sechavarach.
So you have machlokas, next case, right? Bring the salt, bring the dip. All right. Now, again, this is the first mention of needing salt and or a dip, or relish, or spice, whatever, with your bread. So it's a machlokas whether or not it's considered a hefsek. And the final shita is what?
I don't know that you need it.
We'll read Rashi in a second. And what's the last case?
Gvilatori. You say feed the animals. For the bracha.
No, you made the bracha, and then he said, and then right.
Sechavarach. We need to make bracha. Rashid Amar Filu Gvilatori Nami and Sechavarach.
Damar Biyud Amarav.
Amarav Asavadim Shiyachol Kodem Shiyastan Shiyatain Meachol Lepemasa.
Shnamar.
Shnemar.
V'nosati Eiseh Besad Chalivantecha. And then right after that it says V'achal Tavasavata. Right, in order to, meaning that you give to your animals first, then you eat. All right. Rashi, Heviu Melach. Why? Now, okay, that's already a proof that this is a second, whatever. This is a further removed case because it says even this Shavzut Tzarach Bracha. This is considered necessity of the bracha. Shetehe Prusa Shel Bracha Nechelas Betam. So a piece of bread must be eaten with tam. All right. That's the issue we're going to take up because what do you mean? Really? What if it had a non-salt? What if it had a non-flavored piece of meat? What if it had a non-flavored piece of chicken? Right. So this only exists by lechem. So the question that we're going to take up after we define this is, what is it about lechem? What is it about bread? Oh, you can't answer it yet. What is it about? There's no. Well, what is it about bread that there's some idea of having tam to it? Hold on. All right. So that's that. Okay. And gvilatore is that you bring your food to the animals first. All right. So how do you define this? And the second question is, what's each case? Each case is coming to teach you another whatever the svar is, another permutation. So what was the havamina? Let's start with that. What's the havamina? What would you say? I'll give Avram Shlomo some leeway. So I'll take your question and flip it. I'd say, why are we going to even start messing with tzarach bracha? What's the easier approach to take?
Any interruption whatsoever.
Any interruption whatsoever. I mean, isn't that the more logical approach? Any interruption you make after make a bracha, forget talking, anything I do.
Oh, like hand motions or anything.
I'm just saying that's what you should say. You should say it's the interruption. Any interruption per se is defined as a hefsek. Meaning what? Yeah. Let's ping over to the maskana. So now, what would the maskana say? No, not every hefsek. Not everything's considered hefsek.
Isn't that the flow of having maskana? No, isn't that the flow?
But there's some shift. Why do we go away from thinking? That's the real question you have to ask yourself. Why do we stray from the notion of saying that and this is the real thing. Why do we stray away from saying that? Well, I make the bracha and therefore I have to do whatever. Let's use it for food. I make the bracha. What do I have to do right after I make the bracha? I have to eat it. Why would you stray away from that formula?
I mean, because already you're in the promise. Because one could ask, well, technically,
in the abstract, conceptually speaking, of course, the way a bracha should be formulated is that I make a bracha, and then the immediate action that should be done after I make the bracha is
chew and swallow,
eating the food, right? But the question is that, and meaning anything other than what? The point is this. The point is that there's no way to create a shear. Right? There's no way to create a shear of what hefsek would be. How would you determine what a hefsek is? Breathing, hand motions, what? But what if let's say I made a bracha on Motzei Aretz and I said, and I did this. Is that a hefsek?
You just said it. It's quantity time.
I know that, but time isn't enough. There has to be something I'm doing. What if I'm just sitting quiet?
Why? You sit quiet.
Point though. So the point is, Chazal, rather than say, since all these infinite possibilities could be a hefsek, what did Chazal say? Say, forget about it. We're going to choose we're going to create some objective mechanism of determining what hefsek is. It's not that. What's the objective mechanism?
That has to do with what you need.
Well, okay, no, but what framework are we in? The framework of. Come on, what's the halachic term? There's a halachic term for hefsek. There's hefsek as meaning a little interruption, and then there's hesek hadas. All right, so the Gemara says we're going to use that as our barometer for what a hefsek would be. Hesek hadas. When my das is broken, when there's a break in my das, then that's defined as hefsek. So the first example is telling you what? The first example is telling you that I can go ahead and tell my friend, take a piece of challah. Right? Why?
I don't see that.
Why?
That's directly related to the bracha.
That's directly related to the
I
bracha.
don't see like why is that needed.
No, because think about it. Oh, because he has
Be
to.
to him, he has to eat.
Right, he has to eat it. I made the bracha.
Why
He
do you
must
have
eat
to
it.
say, Take a piece of bread.
Because maybe I don't know. Who knows? Who knows why he's waiting around? But by directing him to do that, that's clearly something that's for the benefit of. What's it for? It's for the benefit of the performance of the Misa.
Oh, well, like,
this directly is related to.
Because he could think that Pesach.
But we're not so interested in what he's thinking. The point is like this: if I say that my dibor is directly related to the performance of this bracha, the Misa. Okay. So now let's go to the next case. So what's the case of melach, lifton, right? What's that case? And there's a machlokas about it. The first case is a primary case. So what's the second case going to be?
Enhancement of the actual
What?
Something has to do with the food.
Right. So it enhances the Misa. In other words, bringing lechem or bringing lifton, bringing melach or bringing lifton, what does that do? That enhances the Misa achila. Okay. But the first two, if you notice, the first two are directly related to the actual physical Ma'aseh Achila, right? The actual physical eating of the food. What's the third one?
So mitzvah and Torah.
Okay, you're on the right track.
And prerequisite.
Wow, he knows. But in what realm, though? Not in the actual.
No, just your obligation.
You understand? It's a halachic hechsher. In other words, the second one is a hechsher to the achila itself to make the food taste better. The third one is a conceptual hechsher. It's that before I eat, I must feed my animals. There's nothing to do, and so far as Sarach Bracha is concerned, that's the furthest removed.
I don't see why. I don't see that's weird.
What is? Wait, right? It has nothing to do with the actual performance of putting bread in my mouth.
You can't eat.
As I said, no, halachically, I can't do it. But what is that conceptually? But what does that do with the physical action of eating? Nothing. But making my food taste better, that is an enhancement of the actual food itself. Okay? So that's in a simple way. I don't want to take up the whole issue of Hesach Hadas. That's that Gemara. Now that leads us into the main Gemara. Okay? So go ahead, Yaakov. Take it away.
Yeah. Amar Rava bar Shmuel Misham Abichia. In about Sev Rashai Lebsoa Ad Shibiu Melech Uleftan.
Lifnei.
Thank God for that.
All right, so what does that mean?
You can't make the bracha and eat until you have salt.
Or, don't forget that. Or dip. Or relish. Whatever. So you have to have some enhancement to your bread, right, before you make the bracha.
When you say there's no idea in Shabbos, you mean it.
So the Gemara says you can never do this without what? You can never make a motzi if you don't have
Salt and dip.
salt or dip or something to enhance it. Okay. Okay. Now.
Oh, so he says it's mahir.
Rava bar Shmuel.
What?
He says it's mahir.
It seems that way. Well, you'd still be yotze, so to
If you didn't
speak.
have it and you said it, you're still screwed because you don't have it. So it doesn't matter.
No, you still have to. You still would go ahead and if you made a motzi, you still would eat the bread. Just you're lacking. It's a kiyum. I'd say it's more of a kiyum. Right? Because he says it rashai. But anyway, go on. So now what does he say?
Rava bar Shmuel Ikul lebei Reish Galusa.
So he traveled to Reish Galusa, right?
Ikul lebei Rivsa Ubasa. They gave him bread and he and he made a bracha immediately.
Right. So Amrulay, they said to him, 1 second.
Right.
Right?
Admar Mishmate.
What happened to your position of saying you need salt? In other words, what did he do? So he went to the Reish Galusa and he went ahead and they gave him bread and he just ate it. He made a motzi and ate it.
Correct.
There was never a point in time where he asked for, there was no salt on the table or no lift on. Right? So they said, well, 1 second, you went back in your position? He says, no, Amrullahu, less din sarech.
Bishash.
Right. Do we know what that word means?
Seasoning.
Well, no. So no one really knows what the word means. So there's a big machlokas among the Rishonim what the word means.
What word is this?
Bashash. All right, but let's say for now, Rashi learns it out to be that it's what's called pasnikia. So what's pasnikia?
Bland food.
No. It means what does the bread have in it? Let's make it simple.
Sausage bread.
Well, it's tasty. The bread has taste. Okay? So when do you need salt or lifton?
It doesn't have
When it has no taste.
No taste.
All right? Okay. And Tosa says the same thing, by the way, which we'll get to soon.
Do you pass them all of them?
We do, except for one thing. Okay, so let me just cheat. Look at Tosos real quickly. If you look at Tosos, about halfway through in Tosos says, "The anu ein anu regilim lahavi al shulchan lo melach lo liftan." We don't. Today's minhag is not to bring the stuff to the table. Why? Mishum. Bali Tosos. Mishum the pas shalanu chashuv. Okay, because our pas is considered chashuv, which means it's good. It tastes good. It tastes good. So let me ask you a simple question.
Wait, so
This is the. But let me ask you. Let's answer the question I asked before, which is the more difficult question. What is it about bread? This is the only. You here for that also?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, so that's the real question. The real question is I mean that's the question you should be asking. Why does bread had this halacha.
Creates a suda.
No, great. Mir fires a salvo. There's something about it being enjoyable, right? You're not going to enjoy it if it's bland, right? No, it's good. That's good. Why is that important?
You're not going to eat enough.
Well, Avi, take the idea of svia, and then take what he's saying, and now put it together, and then take what you said before about what'd you say that it's
Creates a suda.
creates a suda. Take all three things that you guys are saying, you mash it up together, and you'll see the idea will emerge. So maybe you said this. Let's start off with Yaakov's point. In other words, so we know bread's different than every other food because bread's the only thing you're kovei suda with, right? You're kovei suda with bread, all right? So now, what feature does bread offer that no other food does? I'm not going to get into the why, but we know what svia. Okay, in other words, there's no other food that produces svia because, like the Torah says, the achata, the savata. Okay, so I would say that before this comes along, what you would think is that svia is really a din in what? In other words, you eat a certain amount of bread, right, and you feel full as a result. It's a quantitative. What's the word I'm looking for? Like it's fullness, right? Like I feel full because I've eaten bread. It makes me feel full, right? But what you're saying, I think, is the key point, which is that you see that when it comes to Su'uda, when it comes to the idea of Svia, there's really two components to Svia. One component that brings about Svia, that brings it about. Okay? One, or I should say, as a component of the Suda. One idea is the food itself, right? But the other idea is the enjoyment a person gets from eating it. That's a component of a Suda. That person has hana from the Suda. And that which is koveya the Suda must have in it that component of hana. So if it's bland, it's true biologically speaking, he'll nourish himself, but he won't have a hanas Suda because it's a bland piece of food. That which is koveya Suda must have part of it something tasty. All right? Okay. But I say that would be the reason why you have to bring the melech and the liftan. At this point in time, okay, halacha l'maisa, like if we cheated and looked at the Shulchan Aruch, halacha l'maisa, halachically, there's no reason whatsoever, anytime you have bread, to ever require salt or any other type of liftan in today's bread. Zero halachic rationale. Efes. None. I can't emphasize that more. Okay? None.
What about
But the question is,
That's a halachic
philosophically,
That's an halachic thing.
it's stemming from a different source. In other words, like this. In other words, there's no idea whatsoever today of bringing salt and / liftan as somehow enhancing your suda. Okay, but there's a separate idea, which we're going to get to right now. So now, take a look at Tosfos now. All right. So what does Tosfos say? So as Avi alluded to before, okay. So Tosfos says, "Miu Rebbe Menachem haya medaktek me'od." So Rebbe Menachem was a frum guy. He was very medaktek, and he would always bring lahavi melach ala shulchan. He'd always bring salt to the table when he had bread. Kedisa b'medrash. Why? Because Yisrael yoshvin ala shulchan umamtinin zed zeh ad yitlu yedayim. So when Jews are sitting at the table and they're umamtinin zed zeh, they're waiting one for the other. Okay. Hold on. Ad sheyitlu yedayim. Veheim below mitzvos. Right, so now what's the problem? We're all waiting around, and what do we not have right now? There's no mitzvos. Well, there's nothing to do. Okay, who shows up? The Satan. Satan mekatreg aleim. So the Satan, his evil ways. He messes with them, right? Oh, bris melach megan aleim. Baruch Hashem, the bris melach. What's the bris melach? What's the bris melach?
It says in
Oh, no.
What's the halach of every korban? Wait, Tamir, what's the halach of every korban? Every korban requires what? Yes, but it requires melach. No, I think it's every korban. We extrapolate every korban. So the Torah says, the whole korban min chasacha b'melach timlach. Then the Torah says, it's Vayikra Beis Yud Gimel. V'lo sashbis melach bris elokecha me'al min chasecha. You have this bris melach. So Rashi says, what's the bris? I don't know what this means. Shabris karusa lamelach v'sheshes shemei brachis. So the salt was consecrated as a bris, and the 6 days of creation. Shehuftachu amayim atachtonim likarev b'mizbeach b'melach. So the mayim tachtonim were promised to be brought up to mizbeach with salt. B'nisuch hamayim b'chag, and there be nisuch hamayim, which is by Sukkos during the Chag. I don't know what that means.
Like,
Like I have no idea. Yeah, it's also saying that you have this spooky bris melach. Will by having salt on the table, so then as the satan comes in and tries to get his pitchfork in there, so the salt, the beams will come off the salt, and like I guess.
Maybe the salt
Dif-
is a
wait,
vampire.
is that right?
Okay, the Shibbolei Leket brings down. This is the reason why most people do it today. He says, "Umashanago lived Saul Melach." He says, "Pirsho Gaonim, Lefisha Matzinu." All right, now this sounds very nice. Shashulchan Nikra Mizbeach. All right, your table is called an altar. Okay, so since it's called an altar, right? So later on, as he says in the end, Uksiv Mizbeach Al Kol Korban Achat Agri Melach. On every korban, you are makriv it with salt. Okay, it's also in Bamidbar. So what's the analogy? So your table is your altar, your food is your korban. So what do you have to have with it? What must be salt? No, the bread is your
How does that
korban.
help?
Your
That doesn't
table
help
is
with
your
the-
altar.
With the other like.
So there is no idea of spreads. If you go down the philosophical road, it's only with salt. There is nothing else other than
Gemara
salt.
says also spread.
Just salt.
But that's
Right?
not what the Gemara says.
No, right. The Gemara never says this. This is medrash already.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm saying, how could
According to the Gemara, today there'd be no reason to bring out salt or lifton. But for some reason, this idea emerged. It's all the way back to the Gonim that you should always have salt no matter what, even if your bread is salted already. Why? Again, because your shulchan's like the mizbeach, therefore your lechem is like your korban, right? And therefore, with those two elements in place, bring out the salt. What kind of idea is that? You weren't here for this. What kind of idea is that? What does that mean? Does that make sense? So there's one idea that we know that there's one idea that when it comes to eating, that Chazal are very concerned about eating. Why?
It's a very Talmudic.
Because eating is a purely instinctual experience, and we always like to take meaning Chazal, always like to take our instinctual experiences and do what with them?
Jewish.
Turn to spiritual.
Judify?
Judify.
Meaning that.
Deify.
Judify.
Being that we have to attach it to some objective benefit. It can't just be about satisfying the instincts. Rather, it has to be attached to somehow how am I going to serve God better? Right? It has to be attached to Avodas Hashem. Right? As an example, every time you have a meal, you're supposed to have a Dvar Torah. Right? Right? So it could be a similar idea here. In other words, but you see, you didn't answer why the salt does it. See, I haven't answered what the salt does. Okay? Why bedafka, this minhag, makes so much sense.
Ruins the taste.
In the sense that you don't have to put it on. No one says you have to put it on the bread. It just has to be there, right? Because you don't need it for the bread. But what's it doing then? Let's take what you're saying. You're right. So what should a person do? A person, when he eats, he should recognize that his eating it shouldn't be simply as a fulfillment of the instinctual need, but rather, how can it benefit him? How can it aid him in serving God? Okay? So he's reminded of the korban, right? Because the korban's what? A korban personifies that idea, like a shlamim. A shlamim, you bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. Part of it is for God, meaning that part of it is not for my benefit, and I take the other part, and that's for my own benefit. But it's in the service of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But what's the salt doing? That's what I really want to bring out. What's the salt doing?
Well,
I don't understand.
Why can't I just say I have the mizbeach, that's my table, and I have my food, my lechem, that's my korban. What's the salt doing?
What's a visual reminder?
What?
It's a visual reminder.
How? You're right, but what's it? More.
It's more distinctive.
It's a simple point. Does the salt belong here now?
No.
No. Right. It's just and from the food standpoint, from the culinary standpoint. Is there any purpose for the salt?
brings out
No.
flavor.
No.
You would probably know my sauce.
What? The point is that by bringing something extraneous to the eating experience,
Reminds you, it's not just about the eating.
bingo. That's how it launches you into reminding you shulchan, mizbeach, lechem, korban. You know what I mean? That's what the salt is doing.
How do you know Chabadniks really?
Because the melach, but by using the melach, what do you now do with the melach? You now relate it back to what?
Toronto.
To
I
korbanos.
agree, I'm just saying that.
You couldn't do that with anything else.
Already.
But you couldn't do that with anything else.
Philosophy is too abstract for people.
And all I'm trying to do, no, it's just saying if I see the salt, what's going to remind you? Okay, I'll put it a different way.
It's too Jewish for
What's going to remind you of the korban and
I'm
mizbeach?
not disagreeing.
It's the
I'm
salt.
saying it's too hard for people to do that, so we got to work on the philosophy here.
I don't know. This is what it is. I'm just telling you what it is,
I-
right?
okay,
But I'm saying, but at this point, but this is not a halachic idea. This is like a philosophical kiyum. Okay. So how do you answer Tosos though? Let's end with that point. Tosos is a little trickier.
Yes.
So Tosfos says that the purpose of it is really for what's it called? It's really for the for people that are waiting around and. I don't know what Megan Bris Melech means. That's a wacky thing. But what's his shot though? What's he saying? What's he concerned with?
Things are wacky.
Tosfos.
He's concerned about the other foolishness.
Well,
Tiniest foolishness to the table.
but what? Okay, is your problem spacing out in general?
Yeah.
You guys do it a lot, or is that a problem?
Definitely.
Okay, so we don't see the Satan's always mekatrek in those situations. Why here? So think about it. It's based on the same idea.
Right.
There's one idea that.
If you don't enter with the right idea, then you're gonna.
Well, what do you? Okay, so I gave an example and I gave a shear over. Okay, so I used to live in New York. So the greatest schmorg is at a place called Marina Del Rey. Okay,
Where's that?
it's in Long. It's off the Throgzak Bridge in New York. So what would you? Before I had to go to a wedding, what would I always think about? I'd always get myself. I would not have lunch. Why? Because I'm fantasizing about what?
The
The schmorg. No, not the drinking. The schmorg. Like how good the schmorg is going to be. I think it's a similar idea here. And Tosfos is saying that there's one concept that a person relates to the meal purely as an instinctual gratification in and of itself. But there's another idea where a person fantasizes about the meal. And that's also a danger. There's a danger in the thing itself, and then there's a danger prior to the meal. That when a person, before he has his meal, what's he thinking about? He's going to space out and think about, I can't wait to have this awesome meal. So I think that's Tosfos' idea.